Last Sunday, in the time period that we're in now, Jordan presented a lesson entitled A Letter from Jesus. This is our theme Sunday. The theme this year being becoming more like Christ. We spent a lot of January laying the groundwork, foundation for those concepts and for what it means to be like Christ. Being like Christ and becoming transformed to His image is easy to talk about. The challenge comes when something happens in our lives that would cause us to be at cross purpose with being in the image of Christ. The test then is, in whose image am I going to be? And so this Sunday we had separated the part for the theme, the spirit and the flesh. And after Jordan presented his lesson last week on Jesus' letter to the church, I want to do something to wrap up the book of Revelation, but I also want to do something to address what we had identified as the theme as well. This is not an easy lesson, because we're going to go to a different throne, and we're going to be in a different throne room. But I think when we see the flesh as it begins to operate in our lives, we need to see what that throne looks like, and we need to be reminded what it is to be in that throne room. And so I've entitled this lesson, A Letter from Satan. Instead of writing a letter to the 7 churches of Asia from Jesus, just imagine for a while with me that we don't have recorded the letter that the angel is sending by John to these 7 churches. We still have an angel, and the angel is delivering the letters to the 7 churches. Paul will talk about in 2 Corinthians chapter 11 that that Satan has his angels that are transformed into ministers of righteousness. And so as Satan walks about in this world, as we have seen in the book of Job that takes place, he's walking about, he comes before God as God is there with the sons of God and tests God with regard to Job and Job's faithfulness. So Satan has his angels, and they can be transformed into ministers of righteousness. And so Satan sends forth his angels. And so as we think about Satan sending forth his angels, he too sends them forth with a commission. In all 7 letters, it begins with a commonality. And that common thing is the angel of the church. And then he writes, you hear these words. And so in chapter 2 and verse 1, we have the angel of the church of Ephesus. These things who holds not the 7 stars, but the 7 demons in his right hand, who walks not in the midst of the 7 golden lampstands, but in the midst of the depth of darkness. So as the angel writes these churches, he's not writing these churches, commissioning them to do good things. He's going to describe the character that he wants them to have in dark ways. For example, in chapter 2 and verse 1, as we've just read, that corresponds to chapter 1 and verse 13 and verse 16. Instead of John writing as it does in verse 13, when he says, in the midst of the 7 lampstands, one like the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the feet, girded about with the chest with a golden band. And instead, the angel of Satan would write, in the midst of the one who holds the 7 demons, one like the appearance of the devil himself, clothed in darkness, down to his feet and girded about his chest, not with a golden band, but girded about his chest with the imprimatur of death. And so everywhere you read in these letters where the angel writes, being sent by John, that in some way God is glorified, instead, this angel writes, God is not mentioned, God is not in the picture. The one who is on the throne ruling, and the one that is ruling in the midst of darkness, the one who is ruling in the midst of ugliness, the one who is ruling in the midst of everything that is evil, presents himself not as someone who stands and holds things up, but as someone who holds death in his hands. For example, you come to verse 17 of chapter 1. When I saw him, I fell down at his feet because I was dead. He laid his hand on me, saying to me, fear me. I am death. I am he who causes death. And behold, I will hold death forever. For I hold the keys to the grave and death. And no man will take those keys from me. I hold you in my hand. And death you will not escape. Then you look at the commendation. And there are 5 of these churches that Satan would commend. He would commend Ephesus for losing their first love. He would commend Thyatira for the evil that is there with Jezebel and the immorality. He would commend Pergamos for practicing false doctrine. He would commend Sardis for having the reputation of men, and he would commend Laodicea for their false view of themselves and how they view themselves as rich and needing nothing. And he would say, just keep thinking that about yourselves. But against 2 churches, he said, I have this thing. This church at Smyrna, what they need to do is they just need to realize, as opposed to verse 10 saying, do not fear these things which you're about to suffer, is that you fear and you tremble the suffering that you're going to face, because you are about to be thrown into prison. And don't worry about being delivered. The second death will hold you imprisoned. Smyrna, this good that you're doing, you just need to forget about that. And Philadelphia, these open doors, they're closed. And when I close a door, that door's closed. No man's going to enter that door. And this business about you persevering, you just as well to quit, you just as well to give up. There's only one end for you. There's no life. The only end is death. Why would you pursue in this false image that you have of life? I hold the keys to death, and there's no open doors. Everything is closed. Everything is lost. And so his condemnation would be to Smyrna and to Philadelphia, you need to repent. You need to repent. Smyrna of being some who stands strong and with strong faith is facing the suffering with no fear. You need to repent of that. You need to look at the suffering that I am bringing upon you, and you need to allow that to cause you to fail, to give up, to quit. And Philadelphia, you need to repent of this optimism you have of these open doors, because you know at my throne, in my throne room, there's nothing optimistic. Everything is dark. Everything is pessimistic. And then he would have their correction. There's no eye salve needed, because you need to be blind. And so, Philadelphia, you don't need to correct those things. You just need to join Laodicea. You need to join Sardis. You need to spend time in Thyatira a little while longer. Because after all, there are a lot of weak people there, but only enough good to make it look appealing. And so he gives the challenge to them. And the challenge is to all of them, you 5 churches, you continue as you are. You continue acting like you're standing against those false prophets, Ephesus. Sardis, you continue acting like you have this great reputation when really you and I both know in character you're nothing, that you're dead, that you're inside, that I'm ruling you. You just keep on. You just need to quit. This persevering is for fools, because it's only going to end up for you in the grave. And what you call a church is really not a group of people that are saved. What you call a church is just simply a collection of people who've come under one roof with but one purpose: to destroy each other. That's what I challenge you with. But there's something else that is there. Satan has his attacks against the church. Satan has his attacks against the church. And when you think about that, you think about how Satan attacks the church. He attacks it from the inside. He attacks it from the outside. In fact, this is what Satan would say with regard to how he would attack the church. But remember the former days when you quit because of the great conflict of sufferings, partly by making others a public spectacle through reproaches and tribulations, and partly by watching and enjoying those who were so treated. For you showed contempt to the prisoners and accepted joyfully the seizure of their property, knowing that you have for yourselves no life, no hope, nothing better to offer. So if Satan were to write Hebrews 10, 32 through 34, that's how he would write it. And then he would say this. He would say, you know what Paul said to those elders at Ephesus? What he said to those elders at Ephesus is absolutely true. And it happened. He told them, I know that after my departure, savage wolves are going to come in, not sparing the flock from among your own selves, speaking perverse things to draw away disciples after them. And that's just what I said would happen, and that's just what happened. Those shepherds aren't there. Those shepherds aren't there to protect you. Those shepherds are really ravenous wolves, and they're not going to spare anybody. He attacks the church from the inside. He attacks the church from the outside. What he really wants is each church to be the same. And how he wants each church to be the same is he wants everyone to continue to follow false doctrine. He wants everyone to give up and quit. He wants everyone to be filled with apathy and with indifference. He doesn't want you to have a care for what is truth or what is error. He doesn't want to have you persevere, and he doesn't want to have you be on fire. In fact, in the Screw Tape letters that C.S. Lewis wrote, Screw Tape is talking to Wormwood, and they're talking about how they can seduce people in the pews, people in church. And Wormwood suggests false teaching. They said, no, that won't work. They have the Bible. Suggested immorality. I said, no, that won't work. They're moral people. Then Screw Tape said, I tell you what, just tell them there's no urgency. Just delay. Just put it off. And so he wants everyone to be the same. He wants everyone to have an indifference, an apathy, a heart that doesn't care. In fact, he doesn't even want you to have a heart that's alive. He wants everyone in his church to have a heart that is dead. And there's something else. He recognizes that congregations take on the personality and spirituality of their members. And so what he wants is he wants everyone weak, but only just a few strong, so the sign will have some appeal. He doesn't care what's on the sign. If the sign has Church of Christ, that's all the better for him. But what he wants is he wants everyone weak. He wants everyone weak. Oh, you can have a strong one spotted here or there just to make it appealing. But he wants everyone weak. Because he knows when everyone is weak, he can rule. He wants you to hate. In fact, if you are a member in the church of Satan, just pause. Think of somebody. Think of somebody. Think of that person. Think of that person who has hurt you. Think of that person who does not respect you. Think of that person who you cannot stand to be in their presence. Think of that person who you want to be harmed. And relish it. Embrace it. Wallow in it. Get that hate. Get that spite. Let it just wash all over you. That person that has spoken something that has hurt you. Those words of cursing. Those words that will pierce. Think of those words. Let those words be the words that come from your heart. The church, he recognizes, takes on the personality and spirituality of the members. Because you see, Satan really doesn't want us to grow. And he wants the church to continue with strife. And so this is how Satan would write the book of the Philippians. I urge Euodia and Syntyche to continue in strife with one another in the Lord. Indeed, true comrade, I also ask you to help these women to continue to be enemies of one another in the cause of the gospel, together with Clement also and the rest of my fellow brothers and workers. Just remember, there is no book of life in which you can have your name. He wants you to continue. He wants to continue immoral. This is how he would write Corinth. It's actually reported there's immorality among you. Immorality is such of a kind that is good. There's nothing wrong with someone having his father's wife. Remain arrogant. You have no need to mourn. Accept all their sins, and you don't need to grow. I mean, for though you've been the teacher for a time, You don't need someone again to teach you the elementary principles of the oracles of God. You have no need of milk, and you cannot eat solid food. That's the personality that Satan wants us to have in his church. But then Satan also knows something. He knows that if he can get us to thinking there's nothing good, he has his church. And what he wants us to recognize is if we can just simply start thinking about him more than we think about someone called God, then he'll have us whether anything immoral takes place or not. You see, the flesh, not the spirit. The flesh rules in that way. And by the way, back to those elders just a moment. Ignore the condition of your flocks and pay no attention to your herds. And then he will further say, there's no need to test yourselves. If you're in the faith, do not examine yourselves, or do you not recognize this about yourself, that Satan is in you? It's okay for you to say, I want things my way. And if I can't have them my way, then I am going to create so much strife and division. Peace will not even be a word that is in the vocabulary. In fact, the more people I can have who have the attitude of it must be my way, not your way, then the more strife there will be. And so he said, you don't need to examine yourself. You don't need to be interested in anything good. All you need to do is have a harsh, critical, negative attitude about everyone and everything, every word that is said, everything that is done, every person you see, and let that be the rule of your heart, and I will be enthroned, and you will be in my synagogue, and you will be in my throne room. It's okay for you to be that negative. It's okay for you to be that detrimental. The church is not about growth. The church is about everything that I see that is bad. The church is about everything that I can tear up. And by the way, if there's something that happens in that place you call an assembly where you worship, if there's something that happens that just a little skew, magnify it. If there's something that happens that you don't really like, you don't care for, magnify it. And furthermore, be sure and tell others about it so they can hate it too. Because the more people I can get to hate what I hate, the more people I have with me in the church of Satan. Be critical of every word. Be critical of every person. Be critical of everything. Be critical of every activity. And the reason is because it's so contagious. It just has to start with one. It doesn't have to be everybody. It just has to start with one. And that one that takes it and exaggerates it and foments it and lets it boil and spew over onto everybody who is in that one's presence, and it will begin to be contagious and spread throughout the whole. In fact, remember this. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. And so if you change the way you look at things, and the way you look at things is everything is negative, everything is critical, and everybody is bad, and everybody is subject, everybody is under suspicion. In fact, that business about long suffering, no. Don't give anybody an inch. If you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. That business about not being puffed up, listen, if you don't think first of yourself, if you don't put yourself, don't take care of number one, nobody else is going to take care of you. And that business about not being selfish, listen. You can't depend on somebody else to watch your own back. You have to watch your own back. This is all about you. It's okay for you to be rude. Because after all, that will help the negative, that'll help the criticism. And look, you view everybody, not giving them the benefit of the doubt. You view everyone you see with cynical eyes. In fact, what you need to do is you need to get really close and find that speck in everybody's eye. Because here's the deal. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. There's no potential. There's only problems. There's no growth. There's only sickness and disease. This is the church of Satan. This is the church of Satan. What Satan wants is he wants us to be blind to anything that is good. And all he wants us to do is simply to tear down, not build up. And so he would say, therefore, just discourage one another and tear each other down just as you also are doing. That's how Satan would have written 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 11. But there's something else about this. Satan expects some things. And Satan expects faithlessness. That faithfulness that he mentions in chapter 2 of Revelation, verse 10, listen, that's a lie. Do not fear any of the things which you're about to suffer. Indeed, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested, and you'll have tribulation 10 days. Be faithful to death, and I will give you the crown of life. You don't have to do that. Listen, I offered him the kingdoms of the world, and he didn't take it. Look at where that led him. It led him to a cross. You can have the faithlessness. You don't have to be faithful. Furthermore, all he wants us to be is inactive. What he tells that church at Sardis, in chapter 3 and verse 1, I know your works, that you have a name, that you're alive, but are dead. Really, you stay dead. And in verse 8, he would say to Philadelphia, I know your works. See, I've set before you an open door. No one can shut it. You have, listen to me, you have little strength. And I know you're going to continue to deny my name. And then he wants insincerity. That first love business? Nah, don't worry about that first love business. Everybody knows first love is puppy love. Everybody knows first love is infatuation. Everybody knows first love will soon fade. And by the way, do you really want to be hot? Do you really want to be cold? Listen, just be lukewarm. It's a whole lot more comfortable to be lukewarm than it is hot or cold. And by the way, not as much is expected of you when you're lukewarm either. And you can still look like you're alive. Or you're dead. But then he also provides this. He would say, but speaking the truth in malice, we're to decline in all aspects into him. Christ is not your head. You don't belong to one another. Each part of the body is independent and jealous of one another. Every individual part provides nothing for the growth of the body, because of the deterioration of the body, for the destruction of the body, with hate and ill will. That's what Satan expects. But Satan also provides something. Satan provides time. That song we led this morning, In His Time, he has that song. In His time, all things will be ugly. In His times, all things will be hate. In His times, all things will be death. In His times, all things will be divided. There's nothing beautiful about that time. He's going to give us time to learn how to do wrong and to do it better and be perfected at it. He's going to give us time to nurture that attitude of malice, that attitude of hate, that attitude of ill will, so that we become second nature to us. He's going to give us time, but He's also going to allow us to be discouraged. He provides discouragement. In fact, one of the best ways He provides discouragement is by providing others. You know that little story He would say about those people there that were about to go into the promised land? And they're there, and that guy Moses, he sends 12 spies over into the promised land, and 10 of those dudes come back and they try to tell everybody the truth. Listen, you can't take the land. And by the way, it worked. It worked. I won. They were turned back, discouraged, in disbelief. Yes, that's what I wanted them to do. They just lost heart. That's what I wanted. He'll provide time. He'll provide discouragement as well. In fact, you remember that cute little story that Jordan told last week about that little boy that was standing there with only one hand? And the teacher was trying to teach the children, here's the church, here's the steeple. And that little boy only has one hand. And the teacher looks down at that little boy as she begins to say, here's the church and here's the steeple. He just got one hand. Well, sorry for you. You can't do that. And that little girl that was standing beside him that Jordan said lent him her other hand, she looked at him and said, you know, that's too bad. You can't be part of the church and you can't ever see the steeple. Because look at what I've got. I've got the church. I've got the people. That's the church of Satan. That's a church that is filled with the flesh. That's a church that has just enough of the Spirit to have of Christ on the door. I would offer an invitation. But Satan needs not offer an invitation. Because as he's already said, the whole world lies in my lap. So I don't need to invite anybody because you're already mine. But that's not the story. And that's not how the story ends. There was a man by the name of Berg. He was a quadriplegic. He was called in 2000 by Coach Bill Belichick of the Ravens, the Baltimore Ravens, to come and to speak to his team. The team had been in a free fall. It had personal troubles, internal troubles, and they were falling apart. Berg came to the compound where the team was gathered after a preseason practice. Rolled in his wheelchair. And here are these big, strong men who are playing football sitting there, slouching in their chairs, falling asleep, thinking, what can this man in this wheelchair ever offer me? And Art Berg began to tell the story about how he became apparently a quadriplegic. He said, I was traveling across the desert highway, and I was going fine, and all of a sudden the car started turning end over end, end over end, end over end. And as a result, it left me a quadriplegic. When I came to in the hospital, it was all I could do. Open an eye. And I lay there thinking, my life is over. I'll never marry. I'll never have children. Why should I go on? And then he finally thought of this poem. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I'm the master of my fate, I'm the captain of my soul. The title of that poem is Invictus. Invictus means unsubdued, invincible, unconquerable. The next preseason game, the Ravens go out. The owner asked Art Berg to come and sit with him in the box. They're behind at halftime. And the owner said, if they pull this game out, I'm going to write Invictus on the walls in the dressing room. They won the game. But sadly, as the season went on, they fell into a free fall, losing 3 straight games. And the players this time asked Coach Billick, will you please bring Art Berg back? This time they weren't slouching in chairs. This time they weren't falling asleep. This time they were sitting up and they were attentive. And he told them, you get to make the choice. You get to decide. You don't have to believe when people tell you you can't do it. You get to make the choice. The Ravens won the Super Bowl that year. At the team party at the end, they invited Art Berg back. And gave him a Super Bowl ring. And on that ring, the word Invictus was engraved. The revelation is about Invictus. It is about being unconquerable. It is about being unsubdued. It is about being invincible. It is the letter of God to the 7 churches to tell 5 you need to get your act together and get it together now. And to tell 2, you are the model of what I want others to be. Revelation is not a letter from Satan to the churches. Revelation is a letter from Jesus to the churches, and this is what he said. These will make war with the Lamb. The Lamb will overcome them, for he is the Lord of lords and the King of kings. And those who are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. That's revelation. And what John and the Spirit are telling all of God's people from that point on is, you are mine, and no one will take you from me. You were born for life. Defeat is not natural for you. You are my church who belongs to my Son. You are the church of Christ. And you win. Satan cannot conquer a people who are filled with the Spirit, in which the image of Christ pulses through our veins, and every word, every thought, every intent, every behavior, every action is filtered through these words. How can I, in this situation, in this circumstance, be in the image of Him? And those who are born in His image and those who awaken His image win. The revelation of John is, Satan, the flesh, have been defeated. The revelation of John is, Invictus, Invictus. Let's stand and sing about that victory.